Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? It is Wednesday, October 9th. Welcome back, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, grannies and gators. We're going to be kind of taking a little bit longer dips into a shorter number of stories tonight. We're not going to be talking about Pierre Polyev demanding the firing of Speaker Jim Ferguson. We're not going to talk about Justin Trudeau getting heckled out of Quebec or going MIA. But what we are going to talk about, as always, to start with, guys, is your daily reminder to get plugged into Substack. We're getting a good number of people over there now, but this is where all of the receipts get delivered. Everything we cover the night before is delivered in print format and download format and link format in Substack. It is free for everybody. There is an option to choose a paid subscription. There is you. I hate to say it, guys, but you don't get anything extra for the paid subscription. But what that does do is allow me to keep this free for everybody else. I know that's a long handle, whatsupcanada.substack.com, but you can also find us over on the headquarters over at whatsupcanada.org, which is this has got the link to the Substack. You can watch everything here. Treat it like your podcast. You can also find us on Spotify, I do believe. Tonight we're streaming to two Facebook platforms. YouTube has strangely let me back on, but nobody's watching on YouTube anyways. I kind of only keep that channel around just because it's a connection to Spotify. X, Instagram, Rumble, and Wimkin. And of course, whatsupcanada.org and lgm.news. We're getting close to launching some new tools with lgm.news. So today we're just going to kind of take a roundabout, and we're going to start with some deeper stories that probably are not coming across your radar. We're going to give a little bit of context. This first one is from a platform I don't know, RPN Entertainment, a day ago, but they're looking at the top three controversies involving our CMP. So I think that's a great place for us to start. Before I do that, though, I've been a little preoccupied today talking with people that are dealing with the incoming hurricanes in Florida. I'm not going to be covering that, at least not yet. Partly because that hits close to home. The last greatest, biggest hurricane ever was Hurricane Irma, I think it was. And I was on the last plane flying into Orlando for that one. So, because I knew that there was people that I knew that couldn't get out of Florida. So I went down to be as much use as I could possibly be. The border and airport security guys all looked at me like I was crazy. They said, we're getting everybody out of Florida, right? And I said, yeah, but my bags are full of gear. I'm going to help. So that was what I did. I ended up spending months down there, and it changed me very much. So my heart and prayers go out to the people in Florida. The whole eastern seaboard has been decimated over the last couple of weeks. That is probably the biggest story of our time. There's a lot of allegations and suspicion going on behind all of that. A lot of discussion that I don't think the cabal was expecting. But we're going to kind of close off with a little bit of a post from lawyer Lisa. When it comes to the whole geoengineering, chemtrails, climate engineering, all of that, I've done some deep dives in the past on that. And man, do I get slam basted every time I do that. So I'm happy to see other people kind of starting to wrap their brains around it and uncover some of the nuts of that. So over the coming days, we'll be touching in with some of that, further updates going on, and that's kind of why I don't I struggle with with the my empathy side, I absorb too much of the pain and the suffering, and it makes me useless. Um, I feel the people. I lived it once myself, and I feel it. And for me, having been a first responder for 15, 18 years, um, I carry a lot of baggage with that still to this day. And so yeah, uh, I got to get away. I got to stay away from that. So forgive me, guys, but know that my heart is with everybody that's doing everything they can with that down there. So we're gonna start with something I am good at, and it doesn't make my eyes leak. Is going after the corruption of these swamp zombies that are doing everything they possibly can to destroy our countries. So for those of you guys that are old here, thank you for being here. It's good to see you. You guys know what to do. Please hit that thumbs up button or the heart and give this a share. And if you're new here, I hope you find enough value to hit the subscribe. And I'll stop rambling away here and get to some more interesting stuff, some controversies, and we'll digest this up afterwards. It's only 6.5 minutes or so, guys.
The RCMP.
Oop.
Top 13 controversies involving the RCMP. Number 13, the Estevan riot, miners killed. In 1933,
oh, they're going way back on this.
Saskatchewan escalated into a bloody clash between striking coal miners and the RCMP. Rather than remaining neutral, the Mounties were there to break the strike, leading to a violent 45-minute confrontation. 3 miners were killed, marking a dark chapter in RCMP history. 2 years later, the force was again involved in the brutal suppression of the On to Ottawa trek, resulting in another deadly confrontation during the Regina riot, leaving a protester and a police officer dead. Number 12.
So it's not the convoy in 2022 was not the first time the West has gone to Ottawa, and the fact that they invoked the Emergencies Act on a peaceful protest, given some of the history that probably most of us didn't know about. I knew about the Estevan riot. I didn't know that there was fatalities and that there was another one a couple of years later with fatalities. So guess it's good to know our history a little better.
Killing of Inuit sled dogs. Between the 1950s and 1970s, the RCMP slaughtered thousands of Inuit-owned sled dogs in what the Inuit called Kim Miijak Tonik. Forgive me, I properly butchered that word. Elders claim this act was a deliberate attempt to dismantle Inuit culture by destroying their way of life.
Our government likes to do that.
An RCMP investigation in 2005 acknowledged the killings, but framed them as necessary for public health reasons. However,
gee, sound familiar, guys? Committing atrocities in the name of public health?
The report admitted the force failed to follow procedures, rarely notified dog owners, and provided little justification for the mass culling. Number 11, dynamite theft. In 1971, the RCMP broke into the storage facilities of Richelieu Explosives and stole an undisclosed amount of dynamite. A year later, officers planted 4 cases of it in Mont-Saint-Grégoire to frame the FLQ. This covert operation was revealed by Solicitor General Francis Fox in 1977.
So Canada's got a much longer history of psyops and framing people in Canada than what most of us were probably aware of. Very interesting.
Tarnishing the RCMP's reputation. Number 10, intelligence mole hunt. In 1967, suspicions of a Soviet mole in Canadian intelligence led to the wrongful targeting of Leslie James Bennett. The accusations ruined Bennett's personal life and career, only for the real mole, Sergeant Gilles Brunet, the son of an RCMP assistant commissioner, to be discovered years later. This mistake highlighted major flaws in the RCMP's intelligence operations. Number 8, the stolen PQ member list. In 1973, RCMP officers broke into a location to steal a computerized list of PQ members, dubbed Operation Ham. This was another covert.
Isn't that kind of like a Watergate? Wow. It's amazing to me how much of this I didn't know and had kind of forgotten about, and am suddenly now much more interested in.
Operation that came to light in 1977, revealing the extent of the RCMP's infiltration of Quebec separatist groups. Number 7. Break-ins and bombings. A 1974 bombing attempt gone wrong led to the arrest of RCMP Corporal Robert Sampson. He was arrested at a hospital after a failed bombing. The bomb exploded while in his hands, causing him to lose some fingers and tearing his eardrums. He admitted during his trial he announced that he had done much worse on behalf of the RCMP.
He had done much worse on behalf of the RCMP than bombing hospitals. Interesting statement. Very interesting statement.
The director of RCMP criminal operations later revealed that the force had carried out over 400 illegal break-ins without warrants since 1970, further damaging its credibility. Number 6.
They never stopped.
The Savoy scandal. In 1992, senior RCMP officer Claude Savoy was exposed for corruption, a revelation that shook the force. The scandal ended with Savoy tragically taking his own life in his Ottawa office. One of his subordinates was later convicted.
That happens more often than we get told as well, guys.
Of corruption in 1999. Number 5. Excessive force at the 1997 APEC Summit. The 1997 APEC Summit in Vancouver turned controversial when the RCMP used pepper spray and strip searches to suppress protests against visiting autocratic leaders. A public inquiry concluded that the force mishandled the situation and that the Canadian government may have pressured them to protect certain foreign leaders from embarrassment.
I'm sorry, guys, but my head is kind of exploding here. I was expecting this because it was released yesterday that this would be talking about, there's an endless litany of crimes that our policing are involved in right now. I'm sorry I didn't watch this. Well, I'm not sorry. You guys are getting my reaction to this as well, but I'm surprised, not surprised. It's nice to get some detail and context on some of this. You can be darn skippy. I'm going to be going and looking into some of these, because this is just, if this is not showing the systemic crimes against the innocent population of Canada, this is just mind bending, right? Exactly. Never heard of any of this. I knew about the Estevan riots. That one I knew about. But so much of this is news to me as well. First, to hear that it's sickening. Rained here a couple times today too, so we get wet hump day. I suppose that's better than dry hump day. Been going on for years and years. Exactly. Now I don't trust most police. This I hope every Canadian sees this so that they can understand why we're not just batshit crazy saying we need reform. We absolutely have a tyranny, and these guys are exactly, Leonard, licensed criminals. It kind of sheds a whole new light on the possibilities and the openness of maybe we have to broaden our scope on what they're capable of, or what they've done, right? And yeah, many fall guys. They've always got a fall guy, right? And always got plausible deniability. Um, yes, I knew about radiation experiments in Alberta, probably why they're cattle mutilations. Um, the government of the United States has used America as its personal backyard play dump for playground for all kinds of evil things. Um, the summit this is kind of new to me, Carly. I'm glad this isn't new to everybody. Uh, Uh, yeah, we thought we were gaining ground, but now we can see it's kind of these guys have got way more practice um, than that than what we give them credit for. Um, Liberal goons, 100%. Well, the Picton Pig Farm is the prime example of that. That was kind of the first time, and I mean, I was still pretty young when that was being pseudo investigated, and I saw so many problems with that. That was kind of really in my adulthood the first time I got involved in digging into the crimes of what our police in Canada are do and are absolutely capable of. So, we shouldn't be surprised when they trample Canadians and then cheer and celebrate about it, right? So, finish this one off here.
Number 4, Alberta bombing scandal.
Oh,
In
imagine that.
1998, the RCMP bombed an oil site in Alberta at the behest of the Alberta Energy Company, with no intent to cause injuries. However, two farmers who had been protesting oil pollution were scapegoated and held without bail. The truth only surfaced during the court proceedings. Number
It's interesting how they don't give any names on that, but I see Carol. You know it, yeah. That was Weebo Ludwig. A teenage girl was killed in that after years of being tormented by the police. Weibo accidentally. I know it's hard to think you could accidentally shoot and kill a teenage girl, but that's the shortest way to say the story. It's absolutely something. It's movie worthy. Not to say Weibo was a good dude, but the police absolutely did some extreme stuff. I was working in there at that time. I was working in him right there where that bomb had gone off, and they blamed it on Weibo. And so we were all working with armed security to protect us from Weibo. And at the end of the day, it was the police that we should have been worried about.
3, torture scandal, Arar El Mayati Al Malki. In one of the most shocking human rights violations tied to the RCMP, Maher Arar, a Canadian citizen, was detained in the US and deported to Syria, where he was tortured for months. The RCMP had falsely implicated him in terrorist activities. Arar's case, along with similar cases involving other Canadians, led to public inquiries, a formal apology, and a 10.5 million settlement from the Canadian government.
That's a real tough one. If that were the case, if he was actually framed by the police, I don't necessarily buy that. I think some of this needs some fact checking. They're kind of giving him these guys the same outs as they gave Omer Cotter, and I don't buy that for one bloody second. So again, as entertaining as this is, and I encourage everybody to always double check everything you see and hear and research it for yourself. So I don't know this platform, and this one here, I absolutely don't trust their statements. But I'll just leave it at that
Number
for
2,
now.
pension fund fraud. A scandal erupted in the early 2000s over fraud and mismanagement within the RCMP's pension and insurance funds. Allegations of corruption reached the upper management, and while an internal investigation was started, it was mysteriously cancelled,
Imagine
leaving
that.
many questions unanswered. The fallout included the resignation of RCMP Commissioner Giuliano Zaccardelli in 2007.
That don't sound like no mafia name at all now, does it?
Number 1, the death of Robert Dzieciolowski. In 2007, Robert Dzieciolowski, a Polish immigrant, was tasered multiple times by RCMP officers at Vancouver International Airport. After being agitated following a long delay at customs, the situation quickly escalated. Dzieciolowski was handcuffed and tasered until he lost consciousness. He was declared dead on the scene. A public inquiry ruled his death a homicide, and two officers were later convicted of perjury for lying during the investigation. It was an eye-opener for me upon examining the history of corruption within the
They were convicted of lying, not murder, but lying. All right.
RCMP. I'm starting to believe that there was significant misconduct occurring during the
All right. So, wow, there definitely some stuff to chew on that. To me, this feels like a whitewash. Probably, I don't want to say federally funded, but definitely um pro-federal piece. Not enough details in there to satisfy me, only enough to give me some embers of things I need to look into some more. But again, though, the establishing the pattern is pretty convincing towards premeditation, right? Uh, so I'm going to go back through. Few of the comments here. Uh, that's because of who was involved in the Picton Pig Farm thing. Yep. They've been trying to legitimize taking our legal guns since forever. Yeah, I was a naive Canadian and believed that the Mounties always got their man. I didn't always know that they made their man before they got him. That makes it a pretty easy way to pad your stats, right? Uh, wow. Yeah, this is something that is in recent memory for most people. Clifford Olson. Um, yeah, I got. Well, Michelle can speak to some of that as well. But yeah, this is a layering on more layers of icing on the corruption of the RCMP. Yep. Well, this is interesting, guys. Right? A lot of corporations commit crimes with the help of the RCMP and well, the Corporation of Canada and every crony is part at the trough with the Trudeau crew. Absolutely. Again, with the help of court clerks, yeah. I covered I had a whistleblower who was blowing the whistle on. It was Windsor, Ontario, where the mayor and a couple of local real estate agents and the CRA agents had to fix in and were all buying multiple properties. They had quite the scam going there of crushing people and stealing their properties for next to nothing and then buying them back. So yeah, a whole bunch of that. But at the end of the day, I'm just a small platform. The whistleblower took a huge risk and nothing ever happened of it. Again, the police were definitely involved in that. Let's see here. I'm sure you have, Carly. There's so much of it. Um, W5 didn't expose and the laundering through the casinos in BC, making that government at the time over $2 billion a year. Nobody got arrested. That poor dude was murdered. How many others? How many others? All that tasing, 100%. Remember the mechanic from Rocky Mountain House that 55 years old, they tased him 8 times trying to kill him, but he was too tough for that and survived. And he's kind of out of I don't know what's going on with him, to be honest with you. Let's see here. Wow, so many comments. Yeah. Bunch of pensions. High River, they went in, stole everybody's private, personal, registered legal firearms. If the RCMP didn't create their own criminal activities, they would have nothing to do. Well, if they didn't actually follow the law instead of making their own crimes, that would keep them occupied as well. Yeah, he was, yeah, like Lee Harvey Oswald, intelligent. I mean, not to let him off the hook, he was a scapegoat, but he was also an absolute scumbag. I used to drive truck right past there during the investigation, and actually before, kind of before the investigation. Um, yeah, Weeble was set up by, and that's not to say he didn't do things, but what happens is these things escalate and escalate and escalate and escalate. Next thing you know, people that start honestly and from a good place are committing crimes, and that's kind of how Weeble was created. Problem, reaction, solution. They provoked enough, and this is exactly on a much larger at scale what they're doing with us here with the Palestine you know protests, right? The Palestine protests, and pretty much everything else. They're it's like we led the show off with last night. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? And they escalate and escalate and escalate until violence is the only is people believe that violence then is the only way out, and that is kind of where what ended up happening with Weibo. So this one here, guys, is going to be a little bit longer, kind of bombshell. I'll if we'll see what it sounds like. I might speed it up a little bit for everybody, but this is a bigger deal, I think, than what people are probably not going to make the mainstream news. And the thing that I wanted everybody to know behind this story coming up here with about MasterCard getting $500 million from the Trudeau government. Why did they get $500 million from the Trudeau government? They got that because George Soros bought MasterCard. So that was a brand new opportunity to launder money. And so this is interesting to see. You will not find this on the mainstream news.
$1 billion in net income last year, and you just spent $2 billion buying another credit cybersecurity company. Why is it that in 2020, former industry minister, Liberal industry minister, Navdeep Bains had to give you $50 million to help on cybersecurity when you have that kind of profit margin?
Over the life of a mortgage, the difference that somebody would pay in interest from a 25-year mortgage to a 30-year mortgage is roughly about $122,000. Does that sound ballpark about right?
Perhaps.
Great. So would you say then like a 30-year mortgage doesn't actually make life more affordable for Canadians? It just makes your banks a little richer.
And nobody else was offering you money anywhere else. So you were coming here anyway, you said. So the $50 million that you took, like the $18 million that Loblaws took for fridges, seemed to just be free money for you, where you were coming here anyway and it made no difference.
Like and subscribe.
I have the very great pleasure today of welcoming among us Darren Hanna, who's the Senior Vice President in Financial Stability and Banking Policy, as well as Mr. Charles Doherty, Assistant General Counsel and Vice President in Legal and Risk.
Your last name, correct me if I got it wrong, but thanks for joining us. From MasterCard Canada, we have Balinder Aluwalia, Senior Vice President, Market Development, and accompanied with Martin Lehman, Vice President, Strategy, Pricing, and Interchange. Thanks for being here.
Georgie's staff.
From the Retail Council of Canada, we have Carl Littler, Senior Vice President. And from Visa Canada, we have Jay Dory, Head of Corporate Affairs. Thanks to all for joining us. Thank you very much. And now to start the discussion, I'll turn it over to MP Perkins for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for this appearing at the start of this important study. My first questions are for the Canadian Bankers Association. Can you tell me by member institution of the CBA what the return on equity of the credit card business is for each bank?
Yeah, for each bank, and certainly not by business line that way.
Can you, if you have access to that, can you pledge to table that with the committee?
I don't have access to it by business line.
Okay, I'm just talking about the Visa business, not by.
I understand that.
The credit card business. Okay, does the CBA have access by each of your members to what the loan loss percentages are for each, for the credit card businesses?
Not by we don't gather the data. We don't gather data like that by institution.
Would you pledge
I can
to
tell
go
you in
get those
aggregate.
can you pledge to go get those from your members?
No, I can tell you in aggregate, though, that the arrears rate for the credit card business writ large is about 1.6% currently.
1.6%, pretty modest. So the next series of questions I have are for MasterCard. Appreciate your presentation. Can you let me know, please, or let the committee know what your revenue was last year globally? Well, publicly reported MasterCard's revenue was 25 billion US globally. How about the operating income?
Don't have that with me.
It was 14 billion US last year. How about the net income?
Probably around 11 billion.
Not around 11.1 billion. So you do know the numbers. Cybersecurity is very, very critical for everybody at this table, right? Can you tell me how important it is for MasterCard? Because I see you recently bought another cybersecurity company for 2.1 billion called Recorded Future. What can you tell me about cybersecurity and the importance and how much you spend on that a year?
I don't have the exact numbers. I can tell you strategically, it's one of the important pillars that we're focused on. We've talked a lot about the role that MasterCard plays as the network and safety and security, and cybersecurity particularly, especially in light of October being Cybersecurity Month.
Wow, that should terrify you. Should terrify us all. George Soros owns MasterCard, owns the cybersecurity. Wow. No wonder some countries want him buried. This company, this needs to be stopped.
Particularly important for our business going forward.
So when you made $11 billion in net income last year and you just spent $2 billion buying another credit cybersecurity company, why is it that in 2020, former industry minister, Liberal industry minister, Navdeep Bains had to give you $50 million to help on cybersecurity when you have that kind of profit margin and you have the ability to go out and buy another cybersecurity company for 2.1 billion?
Mr. Perkins, is a question specifically about the Cybersecurity Center in Vancouver?
Why is it that you needed $50 million from the federal government, MasterCard, to pledge towards improving cybersecurity when you're already putting billions of dollars towards it?
We're very
Right.
proud of our
Why are we paying for that?
Cybersecurity Center in Vancouver. It's a center of excellence for us, one of the first in the world. We invested $500 million in that investment. It is exceptional because it generates Canadian IP, which is kept here in Canada and will be commercialized as Canadian IP. We see the value in driving cybersecurity from Canada, and it's something that we remain very proud of.
Does Jennifer Sloan still work for you?
She does.
She does. So Jennifer Sloan, who used to be a chief of staff in the Liberal government of Jean Chrétien, and her job, I believe, is government relations.
Correct.
Was instrumental in getting $50 million, obviously, because she had a pile of meetings with the industry department lobbying it before that announcement was made to get you $50 million. Why is it that a company with $25 billion of revenue and $11 billion of profit needs $50 million from the taxpayer to do cybersecurity to protect consumers?
Never mind $400 million. What the actual F?
I understand the question. Ultimately, I think it's very important for us to recall that we've spent $500 million in that, specifically the Cybersecurity Center in Vancouver. We're very proud. We've generated over Canadian patents done by Canadian researchers, and will be commercialized from Canada within the MasterCard network.
Here's you don't need the $50 million. So will MasterCard return it to the taxpayer?
Mr. Perkins, again, we've done a great job. We're very proud of everything that we've made in Vancouver, generating.
Sounds like Freeland taught him to talk.
Patents and technology and infrastructure and everything that's important to MasterCard as a cybersecurity center of excellence, and we're committed to that for the future.
This is the Liberal government has a history of handing out money to corporations who don't need it. Loblaw's got $18 million for fridges. I think Loblaw's can afford fridges. And you got $50 million for cybersecurity when you're spending huge amounts, billions, thankfully you are, of money. I just don't understand why you need taxpayer money to do what is your job, which is to have a secure credit card system for Canadians. Why is it you need taxpayer money when you've got billions to do it on your own? Isn't that your job?
Mr. Burgess, we're very proud of everything that's coming out of the Cybersecurity Center of Excellence in Vancouver. Again, 90 patents is not an insignificant amount. We've got a big team. We've got a big office there. We're generating new use cases every day, every week. And we're proud to stand behind everything that's being delivered from the Cybersecurity Center.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Perkins.
I'll start with MasterCard. So just to clarify, in 2020, an announcement they made at a Davos conference, you accepted $50 million from the federal Liberal government. Is that correct? $49 million. So
This woman's magic skill being used for the dark side is knowing exactly what questions to never ask. So I listen to everything she says from the other side of the blade, because if she's asking questions and pretending to be aggressive, the other side of the blade is what she's trying to protect, is my experience with this honorable representative.
in 2023, MasterCard's global revenue was about $25 billion. Did you ever consider that it might be, putting it mildly, reputationally problematic for a company like yours that many Canadians intimately understand the cost of using, to take $50 million of Canadian tax dollars for something that you should probably be doing anyways on your own?
Thank you for the question. I think we've invested $500 million in the Cybersecurity Center of
But
Excellence.
cybersecurity is important and integral to your business, right?
Correct.
So why did you take 50 million tax dollars for something that you should be doing anyways from the federal Liberal government?
I think from where outcomes focused, I think there's a focus on driving new patents, taking Canadians, employing them, giving them those high-paying, high-wage, high-technology jobs.
Okay.
And
So the fees you
commercial
charge, the fees that you charge to business is a big issue, and some folks here have talked about, because those fees potentially get passed on to consumers at a higher cost, with things being higher priced. At the time that you took 50 million Canadian tax dollars from the Liberal government, was your company's lobbying posture against changes or a cap on the amount of fees that you could charge to businesses?
Arrested. They need arrested.
So were you lobbying at the time to not change the status quo on what you could charge to businesses?
That's not my area, unfortunately. I don't know.
You don't know. Okay. Do you think it was possible that the $50 million you took from the federal government and the $500 million for something you should ostensibly be doing anyways was to keep the status quo, or keep the federal Liberal government from changing the status quo on what you could charge to businesses for the use of your services?
Our focus is investment and growth, and Cybersecurity Center of Excellence in Vancouver allows us to continue to invest in the
Like,
infrastructure.
don't you think it's a little sus or weird to ask for $50 million of Canadian tax dollars for something you should be doing anyways?
We invested $500 million in something that we're very proud of.
$121 billion. Thank you. I'm going to then, I'm going to go over to Mr. Hanna for perhaps a little different line of questions. People with high debt to income ratios, like, put a different way, people who pay a significant amount for their mortgage right now, they may use their credit cards more frequently for things like groceries or gas. Would that be a fair characterization?
Possibly.
Possibly. Okay.
Gee, you
I
think?
know that there's a lot of people in my community who do. I hear about it in my office. So the change between a 25-year amortization or a 30-year amortization for a mortgage, right? It might sound good because it might lower your monthly interest payments, but I did a little research, and on the benchmark price of a home in March of 2024 and the total mortgage, the interest paid in over the life of a mortgage, the difference that somebody would pay in interest from a 25-year mortgage to a 30-year mortgage is roughly about $122,000. Does that sound ballpark about right?
Perhaps.
Great. So would you say then, like, a 30-year mortgage doesn't actually make life more affordable for Canadians? It just makes your banks a little richer?
What I'd say is that it gives an additional option And what, in that case, what has to happen is, and what's important then, is your banker and the customer need to meet, talk about the options, and look to determine what works best for the customer. Ultimately, this is a relationship business. The customer you're talking about has at least 2 products with the bank and probably more. They want to make sure that that customer is well served. They want to make sure that that customer is being provided with good value. And they want to make sure that that customer is able to continue to pay.
And look, I know that there's risk in providing Canadians with mortgage, but would you say that like increasing that 30-year mortgage right now, it does make the product a little riskier for you and certainly for the consumer as well too, right?
What I'd say is that it's another option. Arrears rates on mortgages are very low, 0.2%.
But they're increasing,
market.
Right?
They're increasing from a pandemic low that was a historic low. They're reverting back to the norm, but they're still incredibly low.
So would you characterize like mortgages
Nobody should.
affordable in Canada right now?
I would characterize them as being a competitive market, as a market, frankly, let me separate out mortgages and housing. Housing can be quite expensive. Absolutely. I live in the GTA. I know what expensive housing looks like. Mortgages, very competitive market. Its rates did go up as interest rates went up. They're coming down, which is absolutely true. There are options out there, and we want customers to shop around.
Would you say then that perhaps the best way to make housing more affordable for Canadians is not to increase the length of the mortgage, but to increase supply so that prices go down?
We have been firm in saying that supply, this is a supply-driven issue. That is absolutely true.
Thank you.
I did spend a few years working at a head office of a bank on Bay Street, as well as on an executive team of 2 retailers. So I do know what the internal rate of return on equity of the bank I worked for in credit cards, and it was 52%. You've focused a lot, the Canadian Bank Association, on the cost, but they're making a massive amount of profit. When the bank's target ROE was 15%, it was making 52% on credit cards. And I like Mr. Van Bynen said, clearly it's business development to move them to other products because they don't cut the credit card off when they make that shift to a line of credit. So my question, though, I'd like to ask about the interchange. The interchange revenue, Visa, I guess, is the best people, or MasterCard, whichever one wants to take it. The interchange revenue is based on a percentage of the sale, yet the cost does not change based on the sale, does it?
In fact, so the benefits that are afforded to consumers, both in terms of insurance, fraud protection, loss underwriting, as well as the provision of credit, that all fluctuates with the size of the sale and the amount of the underlying transaction.
Yeah, but the difference between what the credit cards company get on 2% of $100 or 2% of $10,000 is very different, and your costs don't go up that much.
With respect to Visa, the costs do fluctuate a little bit. With respect to the card issuers, the banks that are issuing those amounts, I would say they do. The cost to refund a transaction that has been counterfeit or fraudulent for a $100 transaction is $100. That same transaction.
The loss is 1.6%. Generally, bank losses overall across a bank are less than 100 basis points, sometimes less than 50. 1.6% is not huge. In fact, the Business Development Bank of Canada's loan losses are over 2%, and they still make $500 million profit a year. So this is a very, very profitable business, and the expenses don't go up exponentially. For Visa specifically, I just want to summarize. If I understand correctly what you said to my colleague, Mr. Patzer, you were putting the cybersecurity business here because of reasons other than $50 million, because of the talent pool, because of technology, because of the universities.
Part of the thought process.
And nobody else was offering you money anywhere else. So you were coming here anyway, you said. So the $50 million that you took, like the $18 million that Loblaws took for fridges, seemed to just be free money for you, where you were coming here anyway and it made no difference.
We're very proud of everything that we.
I know you're proud of it, and you must be proud of taking the $50 million of taxpayer money when people are in record numbers lining up at food banks. But with that said, Mr. Chair, I'd like to seek unanimous consent on this issue of Visa, and I'll move it as a formal motion for a vote if necessary, but I hope we can get unanimous consent. I believe this may have been sent to the clerk maybe it can be circulated. The following motion that the committee order the production of all documents, emails, memos, and any materials related to the Liberal government's $50 million handout to MasterCard, including the communications between ISED, PCO, and the PMO with MasterCard regarding the grant. And the committee report to the House and express its concern regarding the value for money for taxpayers on the nearly $50 million taxpayer money given to MasterCard by the Trudeau Liberal government. I believe that's been sent to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. You're very hopeful to think we can get unanimous consent 5 minutes before we adjourn a meeting at this committee on such a motion, but I appreciate your
It's a
optimism.
straightforward document production motion. I'm sure everybody
Has it been sent in both official languages? So the clerk will circulate it to members for them to take a look at it. I think it would be fair to give members some time to consider it duly. I'm looking at the other members. Is it can be debated now, or otherwise what I would suggest, Mr. Perkins, is that we come back to it on at our next meeting. Yes, so what I suggest, Mr. Perkins, you moved it on the floor, and it's okay because it's on the topic. However, I would suggest that we bring it up at the start of the next meeting so that members have the time to review it and we can then debate it if you so decide. Is that okay with all members? Yes, and your time, so we'll get back to it. But technically, considering there is a motion on the floor, we probably should just adjourn the meeting at this point. We're at the end of our time. However, I know Mr. McKay had one question, so if members permit, I'd allow Mr. McKay to ask his question.
It's on a nice try. Yes, I don't usually sit on this committee, but it just so happens that my visa is due today. And the money has been moved out of my bank account, but it's not been moved to credit my Visa card. And I dare say, because I've watched this happen a few times, is that the money kind of sits somewhere for about 24 or 48 hours and then ultimately gets credit. And it used to be that they would ding me with interest until I yelled and screamed and jumped up and down, and they stopped doing it. But somehow or another, and here's my scenario, is if I were at my credit limit, I would not be able to conduct a transaction. And that would be a detriment to me, even though I'd paid off my credit card. At least the money had been taken out of my bank account. So to Visa and to the bank, I got a feeling that somebody's making money out of this and it's not me. And I don't quite understand the interchange or exchange between the bank and Visa and how that affects a consumer like me, but somehow or another, the money's out of there. So the bank still has the money, but Visa doesn't have the money. So the bank's got my money for free or overnight, or sometimes it's a lot longer than overnight. And I don't get any compensation for that. And it seems to me that that's true of literally hundreds, well, more, millions.
Cheryl, actually, that is a Spartan helmet, not summoning aliens. No, sorry. I'll just pop this out, just because it's worth seeing. It's a Patriot that does these. It's a Spartan helmet. So, yeah. I'm pretty sure the aliens would drive by, lock the doors, and hit the gas. So just to comfort you, no, not summoning aliens.
Of transactions. So I'd be curious as to, in the 25 seconds you've got left, how you explain that to consumers who are like me, regularly and routinely pay off their account on time.
We answered in 20 seconds or less, apparently. Two things. One, as you rightly pointed out, you get credit for payment on the day you paid it. irrespective of how long it takes to go between your bank and the bank of card issuance. With respect to the mechanics of actually expediting that, that is very much that's what we're working towards with the real-time rail and real-time payments movement, so that that payment can move literally in seconds from one institution to another institution.
What I don't understand is why that doesn't now move in seconds, because if I pay a transaction with my grocery store with a debit card, it's like that. And because it's held up money, who is it that's making money on this interchange?
I can't speak to interchange, but I can tell you right now, the first part that you're talking about is what you're observing is authorization. There's real-time authorization, but the money moves between institutions over the payment system, and that tends to happen, unfortunately, right now.
And everybody gets 10% for the big guy, right? Everybody along the way.
Rail project with Payments Canada. I'm sure you've probably heard something about that, but
So I thought that would be interesting to actually sit through, because they're not talking about this on the news, and just this is just another layer in the onion of evil. That these companies are not only owned by the right hand of Satan, but being paid homage to the tune of $500 million of your money going to keep George Soros's crime syndicate going. So, yeah. That's what they're doing. That's what they're talking about. That's what the legacy media, mercenary media, is not telling you about. So personally, I don't have a credit card. I have a online debit card. That's how I do transactions. So I only put enough money into there. So I get like a dummy account that I use for that. If I ever have to do anything online, which with all of this junk, sometimes I am forced to do, being how do I say it? Mobility challenged, so it's kind of the life we lead. But it's time to if build something new. When the old system is corrupt, you build something new. So now we're going to get into something else. This is an update. This came out from Pierre Polyev this morning, 2 minutes and 16 seconds. And this so the tenure of this show is going to change a little bit into something a little bit more in our face.
And yes, we are Hezbollah, and we are Hamas. There's nothing wrong with being a member of Hamas.
Samadoun, a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel advocacy group.
These are the people that are on the front lines defending Palestine and fighting for its liberation.
That's Samadoun co-founder and international coordinator Charlotte Cates. Samadoun, which means steadfast in Arabic, is banned in Germany and Israel for its vocal support of designated terror groups.
Most of what we do is kind of the activism that you see people do every day in their communities.
He stands with the Palestinian resistance, their heroic action on October 7th. They said, we will leave October 7th.
Without warning, violence and chaos erupts in the Middle East. The Palestinian militant group Hamas striking Israel with thousands of rockets and sending groups of gunmen across the border.
When we see the fascist newspaper saying we are here to celebrate the 7th of October. Yes, we are to celebrate the 7th of October.
You say that those individuals who were at a concert that did not have the weapon, was it heroic for that action to take place?
I do think it is heroic.
Photos online show Cates, who has endorsed several groups Canada considers to be terrorist organizations, accepted a human rights award on August 4th from the Iranian government.
So this one, good on you, Pierre. I'll give you a thumbs up for this little video because this is an absolute mortal threat that these people are able to do business in here. You remember, they tracked down and seized bank accounts for grandmothers that sent $50 to the convoy. But yet this is allowed to thrive and fester and call for the death of Canadians and Americans and Israel and England. And when they're saying death to Canada, that's we the people are Canada. Apparently there's a petition somebody mentioned in the chat here. Pierre's got it. I don't care what opportunity you have to resist against this. I don't want, I really, really try to not tell people what to do. But I can tell you with absolute certainty, and I've got some darker clips on this coming up. People don't want to believe what's coming. So we're going to listen to a clip. Yeah, obviously we're going a little bit late tonight. This is Patrick Pat David. Like him or hate him is irrelevant. He's a pretty smart guy. And he's 11 months ago, he had the guts to talk about the history of Hamas, Hezbollah, and ISIS. And make no mistake, those people that aren't bringing bouncy castles and feeding the poor and cleaning the streets, that's not the people that are owning the streets of every major city in this country now calling for the death of Canada. No. Let's listen to somebody who's much smarter than me tell you guys what these guys are about.
Tensions between Israel and Hamas is not slowing down. Palestine, it's such a mess right now that 400 people got killed in a hospital, where one side is saying Israel did it, the other is saying Hamas did it. President Biden had to go to meet with
every time. It's because I queued these up early.
Even in the meeting, he says, well, with the recent events that happened, we're pretty confident that it was Hamas that did it, but we're looking into it. It's that you didn't do it. Like, that's what Joe Biden said to Netanyahu in his face, which was kind of interesting. And then to the point, 2.2 million people were talking about the Gaza Strip, one of the most densely populated places in the world, 75,000.
My mantra right now is support the country you live in or go live in the country you support. GTFO. Our government should save money and restore the airline industry and pack planes full, sending them home if they're going to be on the streets doing what they're doing. So I strongly agree with you, Esky Dogs.
Some people live within a square mile of no food, no water, no electricity, no hospital supplies. Since the night, they've had none of that. They're being pushed down. Imagine the viruses, the sickness, all of this stuff is taking place. At the same time, Russia.
Now you know why I played this series of clips tonight. One more godless woman. George Soros is funding, and which means we the people, the tax extraction, the parasitical blood-sucking of all of our ability to live and thrive in Canada that's being sucked out of you, we the people, is being funneled into MasterCard and Visa, these credit companies, money laundering scams, Ponzi schemes, whatever you want to call them, and being funneled right back into these people on the streets that are calling for your heads to be used as soccer balls.
Is now getting involved. Hezbollah's commenting Iran's been involved. U.S. is sending 2,000 troops that are ready to go. It's just an absolute mess. So here's what we wanted to do. A number came out, a report, if you're looking at the screen, showing only 4 in 10 18 to 29-year-olds have a negative view of Hamas. If you look at this chart, you'll notice that when you look at 18 to 29-year-olds, 10% of them, 1 out of 10, views them positively. Why do they view them positively? Hamas positively? Where do these 18 to 29-year-olds spend most time with? At universities. Are professors speaking positively about Hamas? Is this why so many billionaires are taking money that they're no longer putting in universities, publicly saying we're no longer supporting University of Pennsylvania or Harvard or Yale or many of these other places? What is this all about? Why are they viewing this way? So we wanted to make a video specifically to talk about the history of Hamas, Hezbollah, and ISIS, a little bit of Al-Qaeda, so you know how they got started, what their motives are, what their vision is, and are they a terrorist organization?
And then you'll understand why Jeremy McKenzie is Jeremy McKenzie.
Categorically, they are. Why are they a terrorist organization? I think we need to take a deep dive.
By that, I mean he paid the price for what you guys see in this historical walk through these organizations. Jeremy fought this evil and paid unspeakable prices for it, and he's very angry seeing these, rightfully so. He knows what's coming better than most of the rest of us. So I have a deep understanding of this too, but I'm going to let Patrick Bet-David talk about it.
About their histories. So if you get value out of this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. So let's get right into it. I want to start off by posing a question for you to be thinking about. When does a political party become a terrorist organization? When do freedom fighters, a lot of people are saying, I'm doing this for freedom. When do freedom fighters stop being heroes and become killers? Let's take a look at Hamas first. So what is Hamas? Hamas is a spin-off, the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. In the late 80s, the Islamist militant group Hamas took over the Gaza Strip after defeating its rival political party, Fatah, in elections in 2006. Its rival party, Fatah, which dominates the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, and rules in the West Bank, has renounced violence. So again, just to isolate these two here, Hamas, pro-violent, Fatah, we're not violence. Okay, we have a different way of going about presenting our argument to others. Okay, so Hamas's founder was Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, a Palestinian cleric who became an activist in local branches of the Muslim Brotherhood after dedicating his early life to Islamic scholarship in Cairo. Yassin established Hamas as the Brotherhood's political arm in Gaza in December of 1987, following the outbreak of the first Intifada, a Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. At the time, Hamas's purpose was to counter Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, another organization whose commitment to violence resisting Israel threatened to draw Palestinian support away from the Brotherhood. In 1988, Hamas established and published its charter calling for the destruction of Israel and the establishment of an Islamic society in historic Palestine, and they called it, we're going to bring back Sharia law to here. So that is their vision. We talked about this in a previous video as well. To continue, in what observers called an attempt to moderate its image, Hamas presented a new document in 2017 that accepted an interim Palestinian state along the Green Line border established before the Six-Day War, but that still refused to recognize Israel. Hamas first employed suicide bombing in April of 1993, 5 months before PLO leader Yasser Arafat and Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin signed the Oslo Accord. Then, finally, the U.S. in 1997 and the European Union designated Hamas a terrorist organization because of its armed resistance against Israel, which has included suicide bombing and rocket attacks. So this category for Hamas happened in 97. Today, Iran is one of Hamas's biggest benefactors, contributing funds, weapons, and training. Iran currently provides some $100 million annually to Hamas, PIJ, and other Palestinian groups designated as terrorist organizations by the U.S. Hamas has fired rockets and mortars into Israel since the group took over the Gaza Strip in the mid-2000s. The group has also carried out incursions into Israeli territory, killing and kidnapping soldiers and civilians. Now, let's take a look at their violent history to see what they've done in the past before. Prior to its 2023 conflict, Hamas and Israel had their deadliest fighting in 2021 when Hamas fired rockets into Israel following...
Now, I'm just pause it for a second here, and I'm not playing this. I'm apolitical on this. This is their fight. It's their war. I don't agree with either side of this. But what I do know is that the Jewish family down the street doesn't want to take my head. These guys in the streets that belong to these organizations that are here in Canada want to take our heads. And that is why we have to have these discussions. I really wouldn't care if one of them, right? If nobody was on the streets calling for my head, I really wouldn't give two shits. But this is dark. This is dark, and it's here. It's in our yards. The next crusades could be fought here, while they're wrecking their countries over there. Support the country you live in, or go live in the country you support. Stop sending money over there. Our government here funds this shit. This has to stop. Our government, the day Trump designated Hamas a terrorist organization and basically froze their bank accounts in the US, Trudeau said, "Oh, don't worry, I got your back." And he gave him $50 million. This is what our government funds. Shouldn't be funding any of it. Shouldn't be funding either side. Let them look after their own shit at this point. Otherwise, Canada's going to be gone. And these people have no qualms. They are capable of absolute inhumanities. And don't think for a second that when they are feeling like they have the ability, and like we brought up last night, our government is backing these guys, not you. I don't know how to make it any more clear, and I can't say the things on camera that he can hear in his position with his video in this channel. Right, so I got to use the tools at my availability, and people need a real reality check on what is taking over the streets of our countries, and it isn't going to get better if we don't get in the way of this, because our government is funding this through, like we saw just before this, MasterCard is probably one of the biggest funders of this, and the Soros organization, Open Society, it all comes from the same place, our government.
On weeks of tensions between Palestinians and Israelis in Jerusalem, and during the 11-day conflict, Hamas and PIJ fired more than 4,000 rockets from Gaza, killing 10 Israeli civilians, injuring more than 300 others. And Hamas reportedly coordinated with the IRGC and Lebanon's Hezbollah, again, IRGC, Iran, Hezbollah, during the fighting, and used so-called
on our street,
along with its usual arsenal of less precise missiles. The United States and Egypt brokered a ceasefire to the conflict. So now let's talk about Hamas's hostages. In addition to Hamas's surprise attack on October 7th, Israel's military said at least 199 people have been taken hostage by Hamas. Officials from the U.S.
Both sides are evil at this point.
Citizens are among the captives. You're hearing numbers around 250 people. And even recently, Hamas came out and said, listen, if they're figuring out a way to do ceasefire, they're talking to Israel, we will negotiate to give some of the children and women hostages up if you ceasefire. They announced this, I think, on
the problem is Thursday, it's here.
Made that announcement. So now we've talked about Hamas. Let's not talk about Hezbollah and what Hezbollah's history is, because I have some history with Hezbollah. Because when I was in Iran,
100% correct.
I remember what Hezbollah was doing to the streets, how many people feared Hezbollah. This is Hezbollah's history. Hezbollah means the party of God, is what they consider themselves. Hezbollah is a Shiite Muslim political party and militant group based in Lebanon, where its extensive security apparatus, political organization, and social services network have fostered its reputation as a state within a state. So what is Hezbollah? They were founded in the chaos of 15-year Lebanese civil war, and Iran's backed group is driven by its opposition to Israel and its resistance to Western influence in the Middle East, with its history carrying out global terrorist attacks. Part of Hezbollah, and in some cases the entire organization, have been designated as a terrorist group by the United States also in 1997 and by many countries. Now, when it comes down to their military strength, in the recent years, long-standing alliances with Iran and Syria have transformed Hezbollah into an increasingly effective military force, one that experts say would pose a challenge in the event of new fighting against its longtime enemy, Israel. Just to put this in perspective so you can look at it with numbers, Hamas is total roughly 40,000 soldiers is what Hamas has. Hezbollah is 150,000, nearly 4 times as powerful as Hamas. By the way, Israel is 400,000. So you may say, wow, Israel is Massive. Not that much bigger than Hezbollah. If you think about it, 150 to 400, it is 2.5 times, but it's not astronomically a bigger military organization. Hezbollah still has a lot of firepower behind their army that they have. Let me continue with Lebanon's failing. At the same time, Hezbollah officials and other leaders in Lebanon are facing public discontent as the nation verges on failure, and Hezbollah's political power could be shrinking. The history of Hezbollah's violence emerged during Lebanon's 15-year civil war, which broke out in 1975 when long-simmering discontent over the large armed Palestinian presence in the country reached a boiling point. They were a group of Shiites influenced by the theocratic government in Iran, the region's major Shiite government, which came to power in 1979. This is when I was born in 78. Khomeini comes in around late January, early February. Hezbollah's take over Iran, and it's a complete different country, complete different revolution, complete different way of living when that took place. And obviously, when this happened in 1979, Hezbollah took arms against the Israeli occupation. So many times when you hear Hezbollah, you'll hear Iran, Iran's funding, Iran, IRGC. You'll keep hearing these phrases. What does that really mean? Seeing an opportunity to expand its influence in Arab states, Iran and its IRGC, which stands for Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, provided funds and training to the budding militia, which adopted the name Hezbollah, meaning the party of God. It earned a reputation for extremist militancy due to its frequent clashes with rival Shiite militias, such as attacks on foreign targets, including the 1983 suicide bombing of barracks housing U.S. and French troops in Beirut, in which more than 300 people died. They were behind it. Hezbollah became a vital asset to Iran, bridging Shiites' Arab-Persian divide as Tehran established proxies throughout the Middle East. Remember how earlier we talked about Hamas's charter, what they stand for? This is Hezbollah's manifesto. Let me read it to you. In 1985 manifesto, they vowed to expel Western powers from Lebanon, called for the destruction of the Israeli state, and pledged allegiance to Iran's supreme leader. It also advocated an Iran-inspired Islamist regime, but emphasized that the Lebanese people should have the freedom of self-determination. So again, Hamas, the enemy, Western civilization, Israel, same exact thing with the manifesto that Hezbollah has. They're very much aligned on who the enemy is. The enemy of an enemy is a friend. You know that whole thing? This is when they're kind of like saying, you hate those guys and those guys? We do too. Let's become friends. That's where they're at. So aside from the manifesto, the group reiterated its commitment to its destruction of the Israeli state in its 2009 manifesto. 24 years later, manifesto, same thing. The enemy is still Israel. Hezbollah has been blamed for attacks on Jewish and Israeli targets abroad, including the 1994 car bombings of a Jewish community center in Argentina, which killed 85 people, and the bombings of the Israeli embassy in London. So some people say, well, maybe if Israel, withdraws and they leave, the tensions will go down. Even after Israel officially withdrew from southern Lebanon in 2000, it continued to clash with Hezbollah. That conflict didn't stop. Periodic conflict between Hezbollah and Israeli forces established into a month-long war in 2006, during which Hezbollah launched thousands of rockets into Israeli territory. And in August 2021, Hezbollah fired more than a dozen rockets in response to Israel's airstrikes in Lebanon. It was the first time the group claimed responsibility for rockets fired into Israel since 2006 Israel-Hezbollah war. Analyst and Brigadier General retired Asaf Orion of the Israeli Institute for National Security Studies says Hezbollah possesses a larger arsenal of artillery than most nations enjoy. And a 2018 report from the Center for Strategic and International Studies called it the world's most heavily armed non-state actor. Hezbollah.
What do they produce? How do they afford that? How do they have the best armed military than most countries? Again, that's where our responsibility as a nation is. We have to stop paying for that. And then maybe the people there won't settle for Hamas and Hezbollah. So this is where, it's time to cut all of the strings. These meat muppets like Trudeau think they're, they think they're special because, they're in the big league. There you get to, skim off the top of funding both sides of wars, and it makes them, heroes in the swamp, maybe. but not in the real world. And we need to stop this. This is one of those things that has to stop with our government correction, is funding these guys so that this can continue, because we're funding both sides.
Hezbollah. Meanwhile, critics say Hezbollah's existence violates UN Security Council Resolution 1559, adopted in 2004, which called for all Lebanese militias to disband and disarm. And in October of 2019, Hezbollah became a target of mass protests, government mismanagement, and years of slow growth had saddled Lebanon with one of the world's highest public debt burdens at 150% of its gross domestic product. So obviously, a lot of people are sitting there saying, well, look, if Hamas is doing what they're doing, if Israel attacks a little too much, Hezbollah is going to get involved to back them up. And did we see a sign of that? That's exactly what happened. Following the October assault on Israel by Hamas, Hezbollah had fired shells across the Israel-Lebanon border in a show of what the group's leaders call solidarity with Hamas. It's like a announcement. Hey, just so everybody knows, we have their back, Hamas. And several Hezbollah's militias reportedly attempted to infiltrate Israel. Iran and Hezbollah likely advised and trained Hamas on how to attack it.
Brenda, Gad Saad described it as this. All of these alphabet supers that are supporting these guys are signing up for gravity conversion. That's how and he understands them very well, right? So he's a very well-known philosopher, professor. But yeah, gravity conversion, that's what they're going to get out of it.
Israel experts say, though, Hamas maintains that neither was involved in planning its 2023 operation. This has been written about all over the place. Wall Street Journal, that Iran was involved in this attack that Hamas had on Israel. So far, we've talked about Hamas and we've talked about Hezbollah. How about ISIS? And how big are they today?
Send them home. Remigrate them.
Let's talk about the history of ISIS. ISIS is a Salafi jihadist group that has conducted and inspired terrorist attacks worldwide, resulting in thousands killed or injured. In 2004, an Iraqi extremist network led by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi merged with Al-Qaeda to form ISIS's predecessor group called Al-Qaeda in Iraq. So in 2013, Al-Qaeda in Iraq changed its name to ISIS, and in 2014, the group separated from Al-Qaeda.
Thank you, Hillary Clinton.
And took over vast swaths of territory in Iraq and Syria. So if you're asking the question, I don't know what a caliphate is, here's the definition of caliphate. It's a political religious state comprising the Muslim community and the lands and peoples under its dominion in the centuries following the death of Prophet Muhammad. Now, in 2019, an international coalition ejected ISIS from its last stronghold in Syria, although the group continues to operate clandestinely there and in Iraq. Despite losing many of its leaders and its territory, ISIS remains capable of conducting insurgent operations in Iraq and Syria while overseeing at least 19 branches and net.
I need a sword. Kidding, not kidding. I need a sword, guys. Email me.
In Africa, Asia, and Europe. And by the way, when you look at size, tier 1 terrorist organization, some would say is Hezbollah, 150,000 of them, right? Tier 2 is Hamas. Tier 3, when you look at ISIS, it's only roughly between 8 to 16,000, and their operating areas is primarily in northern and eastern Syria and northern Iraq. Now, ISIS tactics and targets, ISIS uses targeted killings, IED attacks, and
Trudeau initiated the coloring and crayon and poetry conversion to de-terrorize them. Remember that one? That policy?
Bush's military-style assaults, kidnapping, and suicide attacks in Iraq and Syria. The group also encourages adherents worldwide to conduct operations in their own countries. And ISIS mostly attacks military targets and civilian defense forces, government personnel, infrastructure, in addition to foreign aid workers and civilians who ISIS perceives are working against it or are opposed to the interpretation of Islamic law. So if now you're wondering, you're saying, well, Hezbollah got a terrorist group designation. So did Hamas. Did ISIS ever get that? They did. In 2004, the U.S. State Department designated Al-Qaeda, ISIS's predecessor, as a foreign terrorist organization in December of 2004, a designation that remains in effect for ISIS till today. So even though this is in 2004 and it still stands till today, you may be asking, well, when's the last time they even did an attack? Wasn't that like pre-Trump? Do we have anything that happened? Because during Trump, everybody forgot about ISIS. ISIS was very big during.
He went and bought a strip mall in Edmonton and rents offices. So you can guess at who uses those offices, Mart's girl. So yeah, he's earned his bones. Retirement is nice for him.
Spring. Obama. But I want to give you 4 of the different attacks they had recently. One of them is July 3rd of 2016, they attacked Baghdad, Iraq. They carried out a suicide car bombing that killed more than 200 people. January 16, 2019, in Syria, they conducted a suicide bombing outside of a restaurant, killing 15 people, including 4 Americans. July 19, 2021, Baghdad, Iraq, they conducted a suicide bombing in a crowded market on the eve of Eid al-Adha holiday, killing at least 35 people and injuring more than 60. And last but not least, January of last year, 2022, in Syria, ISIS attacks Gawarian prison, leading to a week-long siege on the facility and surrounding neighborhoods, killing more than 100 prison guards and 400 ISIS detainees. So if you look at this chart, you'll notice a trend. 2 of them are Iraq, 2 of them are Syria, 3 of them are suicide bombing. So again, going back to what their style is, suicide bombing, Iraq, Syria. To finish up the topic here on ISIS and comparing Al-Qaeda, I want to give you a little bit more context before we move on. Al-Qaeda and its affiliate remain a threat to the U.S. homeland, while the Islamic State danger is more to the stability of the Middle East and U.S. interests overseas. Much of their rivalry between the two, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, involves a competition for affiliates, with both trying to spread their model in Al-Qaeda's case to ensure its operational relevance. For now, the Islamic State focus is primarily on Iraq and Syria, and to a lesser degree on the states in the Muslim world, particularly in Libya. Now, in the United States and in Europe, it may inspire lone wolves, but it's not directing its resources to attack in these areas, and security services are prepared for the threat. Al-Qaeda is weaker and less dynamic than the Islamic State, but the former remains more focused on attacking the United States and its Western allies. So they're not targeting Syria and Iraq, they're targeting U.S. So now somebody may be watching this and let's just say you're Palestinian. Let's say you're Muslim. You're watching. It's like, oh my God, what's this all about? How did they put this? How about all the things that Americans have done? Yeah, how about the fact that you guys had a drone strike in August of 2021 and you were targeting somebody, but you missed your target, but you killed 10 innocent people? What about that, huh? U.S. has done that. And it's happened under every president. Biden, we had collateral damage under Trump, and we had collateral damage under Obama, was trying to target this, and all of a sudden they missed the opportunity. Totally get it. There's blood on many different countries' hands, including US's. But there's a difference. And you have to be reasonable enough to ask this question. When's the last time you heard Americans doing suicide bombing? When? Now, Americans believe in God. We also believe in God. I believe in God. But when's the last time you hear things like that? There's a reason why these guys get designated as a terrorist organization, because they're willing to give up their lives to kill people that they think is the enemy. You can sit there and say, Pat, you're out of line. How about the time America? No problem. I'm not sitting here telling you everybody's, everyone's guilty and we're innocent and all this stuff. But you have to be able to reason and say, yeah, it's kind of a good point, man. They don't really have that reputation for doing that. Maybe folks from these 3 places do, but Americans do not. All right, so let's talk about update on Israel-Palestine. The last week here, I've been asking 2 questions. Number 1, how did Israel not know that Hamas was going to attack and they're setting up a facility to learn how to come and get hostages? How does Israel not know? You brag about having the best intelligence in the world, Mossad, and you mean to tell me you missed this one? A little bit weird. Valid question. Then the other one that I asked earlier, and we've been talking about this on podcasts with Vinny, Adam, and Tom, is if Palestinians are so great and they're so innocent, and they're such fantastic, peaceful people, why isn't Egypt willing to take them? They're their neighbors. They know them better than anybody else. Both questions gets a group to say, that's the right question to ask. Terrible question. Or they say, that's the wrong question. How dare you say that about Palestine? Because they know if they leave Palestine, Israel's going to take over Gaza. Really? Yes? Okay, fine. You give that argument. But my question isn't about if they leave. My question is, a lot of people are trying to leave. Why is Egypt saying, no, you can't come here? What's Egypt's incentive of keeping people there? So people say, well, no, that report of Egypt reporting and giving it to Israel is not true. Let me show you what we got here. September 20th intelligence report warned of the possibility that Hamas would launch rocket strikes into Israel over the course of multiple days, the New York Times reported, citing U.S. officials. Then the second report from the CIA, dated October 5th, 2 days before Hamas carried out its attack, warned of an increased probability of violence from Hamas. This is twice. One September 28th, one October 5th, from CIA is what Tom. This is not like it's hypothetical New York Post article. Then a source familiar with the intelligence told CNN the military friction in the Israel-Gaza region is nothing out of the normal, while another official familiar with the reports described them to be times as routine. And meanwhile, Iran is sitting there saying, you know what, you guys crossed the line. We have to now intervene. And what does that really mean? Well, are the Hezbollah going to get involved? They're going to get involved. They got many different ways to get involved. And remember, tier 3, ISIS, 8 to 16,000. Hamas, 40,000. Hezbollah, 150,000. What happens if they get involved? It's a whole different story if they choose to get involved. Now, I want to put this thought for you to be thinking about when it comes down to the hospital with 400 people that got killed in the hospital. Whose fault?
Now, keeping in mind, this is 11 months old. And at this point, you know, people that are following this can connect the dots as to how this has expanded throughout the region. Many events escalating. Turkey, other countries need to be of concern. Sparkler, thank you. I shouldn't assume. Sparkler added a link. I'll add this in the Substack tomorrow. There was some other questions. Where can I get this video? It'll all be in the Substack tomorrow morning, guys. That's why you can get subscribed there. You can get subscribed on whatsupcanada.org. That's why we do this. So all of the videos and stuff that we use, you'll find it there tomorrow morning. And thank you, Sparkler. I will include that list for people's libraries.
Is it Israel? Is it Hamas? When I was living in Iran, during the time when, it's so funny, my dad's telling my wife today on what time I was born. I was born a little bit after midnight on October 18th. My mom's water broke. My dad's taking her to the hospital. There's curfew. They're past curfew. They get held up with semi-automatic weapons saying, what are you doing driving a car when the streets are empty? He says, my wife's water broke. She's pregnant. They escort me to the hospital. And then I'm born literally past midnight on the 18th. Watch the story. An event happens in Iran called Cinema Rex Fire. Cinema Rex Fire, cinema, Rex, name, fire. Cinema Rex was in a city called Abadan. Abadan is a place where all these oil refineries are, okay? There's a police station right across the street from Cinema Rex. When this happens, Khomeini, Hezbollah, everybody said this is the work of Savak. They shut down the entire movie theater. 400 people couldn't leave the movie theater. They caught the place on fire. Pregnant women, kids died. Imagine you're burning, you can't get out because they locked up the place. It's called the Cinema Rex Fire. Okay, I'm sure you've seen the story. They're posting the article all over the page while I'm talking to you. Hezbollah and Khomeini convinced Iranians that Reza Shah Pahlavi did it with the help of Savak. Savak was his Mossad. So our CIA, their Savak. They were trained by Mossad and CIA. Again, their intelligence group, right? You know what ends up happening to everybody in Iran? How dare this cold-hearted billionaire king monarchy spend $25 billion putting the celebration of 2,500 years of Iran. This guy's so rich and we're so poor, and you killed 400 innocent people. Boom, escalated. Everybody said the king did it. Revolution, millions of people in the streets. It was the biggest revolution ever that took place. Coup d'etat with none of the major 4 components that you need for a revolution. You know who won? Khomeini won. The Shah had to get in a helicopter, escape, get in a plane and leave. Do you know what happened a couple months later, a year later? Reports came back. That fire was never the Shah. It was somebody that was part of Khomeini's camp that did it. Guess what? It's too late. Revolution already happened. What's the moral of the story? I don't know if Israel's behind it or not. And I don't know if Hamas is behind it or not. All I know is whoever's behind it that did this intentionally, there's a strategy behind it to put the blame on the other person to increase emotions, possibly yours and mine, and say, how dare they did something like that to get
100%.
Whatever that they want is, we don't know yet. It may take us 6, 12, 18, 24 months to really find out who was behind it. But don't jump to conclusion taking one side or the other because it favors your argument. Sit back a little bit and let's really see what happens. I like what Joe Biden said today when he's across Netanyahu. He says, our intelligence tells us Hamas was behind it, not you. Obviously, we'll find out. But our intelligence said Hamas is behind it. Look at the way he's giving the answers, leaving it out. But he's saying, we have your back, but we're going to find out. That's the right approach to take because we still don't know who was really behind what happened with this hospital. So look, we can do a whole different video.
We know that it was not
on how many times we got close
Legit.
to and how to prevent it. That's going to come up here soon. But I want to give you a final thoughts to be thinking about. One of the biggest challenges you and I have as human beings, because we're emotional beings. Robots don't have this challenge. You and I do. We have something called emotions. We have something called life experiences. We have something called beliefs, religion, who you believe in, what you believe in, political, all this stuff that we have, right? And our loyalty typically is to our parents, our heritage, our background. These guys can never do anything wrong. As a parent, I've been in the office where my kids were at fault, and I'm sitting there saying, you paid a price. What is his, price? He's going to be suspended. Totally get it. You paid a price. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a conversation. And then if I think it's too much, I'll have the private conversation with the principal. But if I think it's right, it's right. And there's been times where I've been in a place where I've watched the punishments went way too much. And I said, I don't think I'm good with this punishment. Did you guys look at the tape? So we have to be fair. There's some parents are like, no, my kids are never wrong. He's an angel. And it's a lie, because when I was a kid, there were many times I was wrong. Okay. And I know I was wrong as a kid, just like yourself. What's the moral of the story? Let's do our best to not join the jump to conclusion community just because it validates your argument or my argument. We're all guilty every once in a while. Not sitting here telling you I'm an angel or you're an angel. All I'm saying, during times like this where emotions goes from 0 to let's, go to war and do this, let's kind of pump the brakes and let's not jump to conclusion. The only suggestion I got for everybody, the goal is to prevent people from dying. That's the goal. The goal is for people to live their lives. And the goal is to hold people accountable who are doing things that is not appropriate.
Amen.
And they're taking people's lives. But before we jump to conclusion, let's see who's behind it. Let's do some research. And then once we know, and if you're right, salute to you. If you're wrong, hey, I was wrong. Totally okay. I'm okay being wrong, and I'm okay being right. I'm more interested in finding out the truth, not being right or wrong. That's my job. Anyways, hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight. Having said that, we did a video.
All right. I very much agree with what Patrick Bet David has said here in this, and the point of this, why I wanted everybody to hear this, is because now we've got 11 months of knowledge later. We can look back and reflect on that, but this absolutely pertains to what we are experiencing here in Canada. And wow, we've been going an hour and a half already. Everything else I had was, I think, pretty long, but tomorrow's going to be a doozy, guys. The overflow from tonight that I'm not going to get to. Y'all know who Victor David Hansen is? This will be the last clip tonight, guys, and then I'll let everybody go. I'm going to get a bunch tomorrow that'll kind of fill in the blanks on some of this. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll chew on this after he's done.
Happen. The very rare in history happens, and the people that it happens to don't believe it will happen to them. And the people who are conquering them are not Genghis Khan or Tamerlane or Attila the Hun that come in, sweep through a civilization, murder people, and move on. They are intellectuals. They're very capable people. They're very well read. They're very articulate. Alexander the Great, student of Aristotle, companion of the philosopher Callisthenes, when he said to the Thebans, I will be down there in 300 miles, I will be down there in 10 days. And if you don't, and I'm wipe your city out. They didn't think that was imaginable. The city was 1,100 years old. Or when Scipio came, they said, we fought the Romans twice. And we always had an agreement after we lost. And we remember Scipio Africanus, your adopted grandfather. And he was he gave us terms, and we're the city of Hannibal. We were.
So I see some people don't know who Victor David Hansen is. He's the fellow on the right, obviously. He is one of the most honest historians and philosophers in the United States. And, he's been very outspoken down there about this wash, rinse, repeat, the danger, the existential threat, all of these things. He's an highly, highly, highly intelligent gentleman, and given everything that's going on around us, this clip is explaining, the fall of a civilization, of a society, of a nation. That's what he's going to be going over here in 13 minutes or so. So, I hope we've taken a path tonight through some of the crimes, the banking, the money, the funding, who it's doing, who it's funding, who's doing it on our streets, and here now kind of to the what's on the other side if we don't take control of our children's futures in this country. So so I hope that kind of sets up this clip a little bit.
And they didn't understand Scipio Emilianus was a killer, and he was going to destroy everything that was Carthage, down to the foundations of the city. And when Constantine XI was dealing with Mehmet, he sent him a letter and he said, "You're only 21 years old, and we've been here for 1,100 years, and we're very valuable to Islam. We're the window on the West. You can buy cannon, you can get expertise with your concessions inside the walls of Constantinople." And Mehmet basically said, "You've only got about 50 or 60,000 people. You're not the Byzantine Empire of the past. And I don't want to hear anything you have to say." And same thing, I could go with the same argument. What I'm getting at is they had no imagination how weak they were and what the actual intent of their enemies are. And when you look at the real world, and you ask yourself, if President Xi really wanted to take Taiwan, would he be willing to destroy it, to take it, to get rid of it? Everybody says, well, he wouldn't do that because of the chip industry, or he would lose too much. But could he be stopped without a nuclear exchange? I don't think he could, myself, given the military right now. I think he could be in 5 years if we rearm. I think if Ukraine, everybody thinks the Ukraine thing is static, but to win that war, the only way Ukraine can get Russia off its back is to follow traditional military logic, and that would probably be to hit Russian supply depots, oil refineries along the border to interrupt their invasion. But to do that would, I think, invite a response from Putin that would be very unpredictable. And I don't think he would care at all if he could level Kiev and get away with it. So, and I don't need to talk about Turkey. Turkey is a member of NATO, but if you came from another planet and you looked at what Turkey has said and done, it's supplying Russia with weapons. It can't be trusted with NATO arms. During the coup 6 years ago in Turkey, Mr. Erdogan let it be known that our Cold War huge dirty bombs, I think we have 50 nuclear weapons at Isilar. He said he didn't think that they were properly the property of the United States. They'd been there so long to protect Turkey that he felt that they were Turkish and he didn't want them removed. And I know there are people in the US military that feel they have to remove them, whether stealthily or one by one, because they don't feel they're in a safe place. That tomorrow, if there was a conflagration between Greece and Turkey, or the Armenia and Turkey, or the Kurds and Turkey, that base could be surrounded and the weapons could be appropriated. And all of this is dependent on a West that can't deter people. And we think we've been here so long and we've run the show so long that that's just unthinkable. All the inventions, all the technology, all the universities, they're all Western, and therefore the world needs us. I don't think that's necessarily true. And so I wouldn't worry if today the English-speaking countries were armed to the teeth. They were spending 3 or 4% GDP. They had sophisticated anti-missile protection like the Iron Dome. They had both nuclear and tactical capabilities. They had Churchillian-like leaders, and then they were and they weren't suffering from this fertility crisis, and debt crisis. But I don't see that on the world today, so I'm very, very worried that something terrible could happen. I don't think it's likely, but I think it could happen.
Actually, in the book, you describe some pretty.
Couple of comments I want to catch up on before we get too far behind. Turkey does have a powerful military. It actually has probably the most powerful military in the Eastern Mediterranean. And they are probably, and again, put Canada's twinkle toes against and our neutered military against the Turkish military. I don't like the odds of that. As a matter of fact, when you think about all of NATO collectively giving the best, the brightest, the most money to Ukraine and Zelensky, at one point, Putin's troops were 500 yards outside of Kiev. Then they went home, and then Kiev provoked something more significant. And here we are 3 years later. And collectively, NATO has been neutered, blood dry. It's not Trudeau just saying to our veterans, you're asking for more than I can give. Lord Farquaad is having to tell NATO, you're asking for more than Canada has left to give, while our military is using 1960s gear. So that's kind of the state of this Chihuahua paper tiger that Trudeau is, pissing on the Russian bear dog that is basically taken on all of NATO collectively, and is making out pretty well. You know, they're definitely winning the war of attrition, and things are going to get stupider, in my opinion. I hope not, but they could. You know, thank goodness there are people not in Canada or US, but there are people in positions of power around the world that aren't in favor of a nuclear end day of this planet. So back to the video.
Horrific torture and death in your book, mainly by quoting historic eyewitnesses. The Carthaginians torturing and killing torturing and killing Romans, human sacrifice by both those people and most notoriously the Aztecs. Since you wrote this book, as you just said, of course, we've seen brutality that must match even those horrendous examples in your book. With the slaughtering of and raping and just sheer unbelievable cruelty by Hamas in their successful attempt, I suppose you'd say, to provoke what's now happened. It's a powerful reminder to very, very, very soft generations in the West who have lived in the peace and security secured by our own forebears that human nature hasn't changed. And you wonder whether we haven't inculcated in ourselves such a naivety, such a sort of an innocence, such a hopeless failure to recognize just how cruel we actually can be when we're debased. And that ought to be a massive warning in itself. People ought to be genuinely afraid of what might happen to themselves, to their children, to their loved ones, if we're not prepared to say, freedom matters, law matters. We've got to stand up so that we can secure the things we have.
Right.
But we seem so blinded.
The veneer of civilization, as Thucydides says, is always very thin because human nature is unchanging. So when I wrote collated from the historian Appian and parts of Livy, that gruesome scene on the walls were to get the attention of the Romans. They cut off the ears and disemboweled, cut and mutilated these Roman soldiers and then threw them from the walls. I was kind of shocked. There's a lot of barbarity in the ancient world, but that was one of the most graphic scenes. I'd known of the scene for some years, but when I read and I looked at some of the videos from Hamas, two things struck me. One, I had never seen in the modern world that level of mutilation or gang rape or sickness, putting a child in a microwave, for example. And I'd never seen such indifference to it. So here we are 6 8 months later. And the people on the campus don't even mention it. And not only do they not mention it, they were cheering it on after it happened. As I said, a number of professors have been put on leave, professors, not students, for saying things like they were exhilarated. And this was the beginning of the Free Palestine movement. And so we're always just a hair's breadth from what we really are, which is pretty savage without civilization. That's why it's very important when we watch these campus things that you put a high premium on having a clean campus. You have a high premium that nobody breaks in and destroys books or overturns chairs or defecates in a classroom floor. If you don't do that, each insidious assault on civilization takes away that veneer. And it can happen very quickly. And that's why I think what was so shocking.
Kids in litter boxes in the classroom, right?
Talking about the demonstrations were not just the ideology, but the manner in which they treated people. They went right back to they were like the black shirts of the 1930s in Germany, where they just started roughing people up and nobody said a word. Or they were like the anarchists of 19, where they.
Have you seen the videos of what's been going on around these quote unquote protests with this Free Palestine movement, this Death to Canada movement? Absolutely happening, and the police are accusing the victims and making life difficult for the victims.
They just destroyed things. And one of the most disturbing pictures that I saw was the UCLA campus when they were forced out. It was unimaginable, the flotsam and jetsam that was left. It was almost disgraceful. And then you had these Mexican-American dutiful maintenance people that had to deal with human excrement and needles. It was just horrific. And these were our future leaders, the elite. No one had even said anything about it. No college president said, you've done millions of dollars of damage to our infrastructure and you're going to pay for it. So the veneer of.
That's exactly what they've done to the academic upper echelon across Canada, have they not? 100%.
Civilization can be erased very quickly, and then what's beneath it is pretty scary. And so, when Iran was talking about sending its 320 cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and drones, they were talking. That was the largest barrage in missile attacks since World War II from V2 rockets. We've never seen that many, and people forget that the intent was not measured. Anthony Blinken said, if you want to attack, you have to do it within limits. They didn't do it within limits. The idea was to swarm the defenses with drones and cruise missiles and then have the 120 ballistic missiles do some real damage. And nobody said anything after. They just shrugged. I think we don't even realize now that has opened a new chapter. We know now that the Israeli homeland and the Iranian homeland are not sacrosanct. That it's okay to attack it or vice versa, given Iran's attack on the homeland of Israel. And I expect in the years to follow, months to follow, weeks to follow, that there's going to be some very scary things go on. But I don't think there'll be a second Holocaust. I just don't think there will be a second Holocaust. I think if Israel decides that Iran has the bomb, and then they will conclude that they will use it, and they have good reason to believe that, and they will not allow that to be used. And that's going to be something that no one can imagine what would happen in the nuclear exchange. And yet we don't seem to. I mean, we're talking about a situation as we speak that the major maritime corridors of commerce and communications and trade are shutting down. The Red Sea is inoperable now thanks to the Houthis. The Black Sea is a war zone. the Straits of Hormuz, Iran is hijacking ships. The eastern coast of the Mediterranean is iffy, and they've talked about attacking the Suez Canal. And so this is very insidious, and I don't think that we're kind of decivilizing both at home and abroad. We don't quite see it. This new axis of Russia, Iran, China, North Korea, if countries like Qatar or Turkey or India think it's on the ascendance, then they may want to passively or covertly aid it. And if they think we're in the descendants, their attitude is, well, I don't want to be bullied by Russia or China and have a ambivalent America that can't protect me, or I don't know whether I'm under its nuclear shield or not. So I have to make the necessary adjustment. And then the world gets very scary. And so I think I wrote the book with that in mind, but I didn't have any idea that it would crystallize as it did on October 7th.
Okay, that's the last video that I'm going to play tonight, and I'll answer your question here right now, Billy, actually. So what was the point of me showing us this is I think people underestimate the significance of some of the stuff that's going on in the rest of the world, and most of what they are being told is absolute bullshit if they're listening to any of the mercenary media out there. And there's a lot of it that's going on out there. And so here's the deal out there that I see is seems to be two camps. There's the rage recruiting and the hate recruiting. And so that's kind of a balance scale of that. And I don't want people to get recruited into some of those camps. What I wanted to do tonight was to show a progression of kind of where we're at, who's funding it, starting with who's funding it, where the money is being stolen from, and what these people, this political Islam, radical Islam, whatever you want to call it, this color revolution that they're paying for, that you're paying for, is being created by these countries, right? So that's oh, Billy, I'm telling you. This is going to keep going in the Middle East. We got to get out of there, and we got to send the people that want to fight for Palestine and Israel back to Palestine and Israel. The end of the day, that's exactly what it is. You want a spade, support the country you're in, or go live in the country you support. It's time for a remigration movement. Otherwise, these countries that are on the ascension are going to wipe us out, and you can it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing, but they're not talking about it's all the same thing. It doesn't matter. If they're not supporting the country that they live in, i.e. our country, it's time for us to demand that they go home. So I'm not going to argue with you anymore on that. That's a wrap for tonight, folks. And then some. 2 hours. Wow, how did that turn into 2 hours? Same time, same place tomorrow. And what else? That's it. If that wasn't a mind bender, yeah, down below, the Substack, guys. All the links, all the videos will be there tomorrow. You can find that for free. And we'll see you 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. All right. Stay fierce, my fellow family, friends, patriots, prisoners, and hostages. At the end of the day, we're going to get this. So, bye for now.